Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and change makers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I'm your host, Patty Dayleg, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What We Made Possible. And this is part of a series on Healing Tides, which is a project that I've gotten to work on for the past 2.5 years. And I'm here today with Sasi of SoCal PICRT. So SoCal PICRT is a grassroots organization dedicated to supporting and uplifting Pacific Islander communities across Southern California. They focus on culturally responsive outreach, health access, advocacy, and community engagement to ensure that NHPI voices are heard and needs are met. Their coalition is spread throughout Southern California, covering Central Valley all the way down to San Diego. And through collaboration, education, and direct support, PICRT strengthens community resilience and fosters a space where Pacific Islander identities and experiences are celebrated. Welcome, Isa.
Thank you, Patty.
So, Isa, you want to tell us a little bit about your role as the advocacy coordinator?
Yes, so my position at SoCal Picker has to do with anything around policy and advocacy. Some of the things that we focus on at SoCal Picker is language access, like ensuring that our communities have like translated materials when it comes to resources. And then we also focus on data disaggregation for our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community. We are usually overlooked when it comes to our population numbers being so small. So we focus a lot on trying to get data for our communities to be able to use when it comes to trying to apply for resources and ensuring our community is captured in numbers. And then the other things that we focus on is like civic engagement. So it'd be like political education when it comes to, like elections that come up, and then like mental health is seeing out how we can protect our communities when it comes to mental health resources. Yeah, so that's what I do at SoCal Picker.
Which is a beautiful job to do. We were just talking offline and, talking about the roles that you had before being at this organization. My usual first question that I ask folks when they're on here is what is something in your day-to-day reality, something you do every day now that you didn't know was possible in the past, that a previous version of you didn't know was possible? And not to lead you there, but just curious.
Oh yeah, so I think for me it's more so like just working in nonprofit in general, and the ability to multitask because in nonprofit you wear many different hats. And then just like thinking about, going from like a corporate job to working in a nonprofit under someone that our executive director, Alisi Tulua, her being my mentor for like over 12 years and bringing me into the work when I was 18, right? As like a young college student and introducing me to community and what community work looks like. And then 12 years later, working under her, right? And under her mentorship, navigating like the advocacy world for our communities. And just being able to learn from her in general is a privilege, which I'm forever grateful. So it's just like a full circle moment for me being able to serve my own community at this age and then all the knowledge that I picked up along the way.
Yeah, you're like a lot of people where you have been in community work kind of like on the volunteer side, right? And now that the organization has gotten to a certain point, you're able to be on staff and do this work, like to be like paid for it, right? To be paid and be able to make a living off of serving community, which is a beautiful thing. So you joined SoCal PICRT during a moment of transition, of growth, when Healing Tides first started and I first was introduced to SoCal PICRT. It was the four founders, right? The four aunties. And now there's an executive director, there's a team, and you stepped into it, right, in that moment of change. So I'm curious what you noticed about the org when you stepped in. And as a person who's like coming into paid community work after having like been involved for so long, I'm curious where you felt supported and also where you felt invited to kind of like grow into your own leadership.
Yeah, so I think at the beginning when I joined SoCal Picker during COVID, it was things were totally different because of what our communities were going through, and then just like the resources that we had to offer during the time. I think going from working under the aunties to just Alisi being the ED, a lot of things have shifted over time. Whereas before we had four people to report to, and it almost felt like who should we report to at this moment? Because when the aunties were in charge, it was more so they also had their own jobs like during the day. So I think one of the challenges was, communicating with them sometimes and ensuring that our communications are clear when it comes to the different projects that we are on versus just being under one person has helped our team grow in a way where there's more structure and there's more direction when it comes to the work. But the AMTs, they still serve as like advisory board, which is nice to have because they've been part of community for so long. And I think like when it comes to our community, elders are people that we honor when it comes to our work.
I It's totally normal, I think, when you have leadership that is volunteer, right? And then you're one of the first like paid staff before there was like a formal kind of structure. And like I think that that challenge around like communication is normal, right? And like almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Expected, right? Because the organization is so new, like there's certain kind of like norms and structures that haven't been solidified yet. And so it's like such a typical challenge for organizations in that space. And now that there's a different structure and there's more structure, it makes sense that, communication looks different.
I also think like when it comes to our own org and building structure, having Alicia around, I notice how she works, right? She ensures that she checks in with everyone on a weekly basis individually because we are a coalition and then we also have a working side, right? So sometimes like responsibilities can like interchange when it comes to a certain position. So for example, me as an advocacy coordinator, right? It's like I'm not only doing advocacy work, I'm also like helping develop the org with Healing Tides. On top of that, doing social media, making sure that we show up to events to support our partnering orgs. There's just so many elements to the position, but the great thing about having an amazing ED is that she ensures that we are all taken care of when it comes to our one-on-one check-ins. And then she also is very patient, very, very patient. I think when it comes to nonprofit work, it's like there's so many things that can come your way at once to the point where like you can either like feel burnout or feel overwhelmed with like how much you have to get done because one, the work never ends, right? Two, it's like you have to find balance between working like work life and then your own home life when it comes to being Pacific Islander. But she ensures that like we're able to grow through the work and like have our check-ins when it comes to making sure that we're okay with the work that we're doing. And then she gives us space to be able to grow through the like assignments that we have, right? And I think that's why I'm very grateful for her is because She has the patience, she has the experience to be able to pour into others, especially with her working 20 plus years in nonprofit. Alicia is very humble and she never really mentions how many people know she knows or the connection she has, but like if you ask her if she knows someone or like if she knows something, she'll probably tell you like in private rather than be like flamboyant and like brag about it, right? So I always admire her for being humble and then like also bringing up a lot of people from my generation into the work and investing in us as like when we were youth and then now here we are, like 10, 12 years later being able to pour into our own communities, which is like really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, Alicia is really a weaver, right? Like she sees the strengths of each individual like person and organization and like knows how to bring it in, knows how to kind of like capture it and like allow it to flourish if that makes sense. Like she saw you like you met what 12 years ago I think you said
Yeah.
and like has she's seen you grow up in this work and now you're in this position. I'm curious, like, what are some of the ways that you have noticed yourself grow because you have that mentorship and the almost like the challenge to grow?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much growth, right? Going from 18 to just running like workshops at a college for students to be able to gather to like now like traveling, right? To go meet with legislators or educate community on language justice. I'm very passionate about the work I do and I usually get emotional about it because I think our community deserves best. And I think, oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. But I just I look at the younger generation and they just hope the best for them. So when it comes to growth, it's like I did not know anything about the processes it takes to like pass a bill, the low numbers that we have in community when it comes to voting. And I always tell people in our community that I don't think there is true change in the work that we all do, but I think the change starts with policy and making our community visible. And I think I went from like a 18-year-old student that would go on, I had my first ledge visit, right? And was like super nervous to talk to a legislator that doesn't know anything about our Pacific Islander community to someone that isn't really scared to walk into those rooms and to take up space because we've never had the privilege of that, but also having the privilege to educate people on like the history of language justice, right? Like being very specific, but it's like, back then it was like Spanish was the like dominant language to like moving forward today where English is like something that they only really value in the government. I'm diving a little too deep. I'm like very passionate to where like the government almost gaslights us to think like English is the dominant language and that other cultures are not really welcome when it comes to being patriotic, right? And then just being under like the new administration and dealing with the barriers that we face in nonprofit is real when it comes to budget cuts. And I know that in our community, we're really feeling it when it comes to like government assistance, right? Or just connecting folks to like housing, right? And ensuring that our community gets all the resources that they can. But I think when it comes to my own growth, I'm able to walk into these rooms and like know what I'm talking about and own it and then be able to call out when we're not being prioritized and be able to bring these personal narratives to the front end because I think when you work in community, you hear all these things happening. And I didn't mean to get emotional, but you hear like the struggle that our folks go through. And it's just like, you just wish that there was a way for there to be more like funding to be able to help our people out. But that is the reason why I do what I do. And I'm very grateful to be in position. Most times I play the background role just because it's just something that I prefer. It's a lot for me to just be on this platform and be able to share the things.
I'm so grateful for you for sharing that because honestly, like in nonprofit work, it's really easy to get caught up in the day to day. Like, oh, we got to get this bill passed. We got to make certain number of calls. We gotta have this certain number of meetings. We have to have a certain number of constituents. Call the elected. Da 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 da. Right, the mechanics of it, but it's so much more grounding to be connected to those stories. And the fact that you know those stories so well, that you've been in community doing the work for so long, and now you get to take up space and like bring those stories to the people who have power, who, for lack of a better word, have like ignored, right? These stories that you're like, no, like you have to listen to this now. That's so powerful. And who better than someone who's been in this since you were a student organizer at 18?
Thank you, Patty.
Yeah. Yeah. Healing Tides is really about like the idea of healing as an individual, healing as organizations and teams, and how when we are feeling healed and whole and we are able to pour into the work, then our organizations can thrive and therefore our organizations can serve our communities well. So it really matters, right? This like healing part matters. How has that shown up for you in your day to day?
I think when it comes to working in nonprofit, it's so easy to get stressed out over the workload that you have. So for me, it's like prioritizing breaks and ensuring that if I feel like I'm mentally strained, to just like walk away from my laptop, but also learning to feel through things is something that I'm relearning now because I would say that I could be very self-critical, and I think that's very often for folks, but and then also very aware, self-aware, right? So where I'm being so aware of like the situation, how I'm behaving, and then just like diving deep into that to where I forget to feel through the things that I'm going through, right? So relearning that is something that I'm prioritizing now. And then something that I'm looking forward to working on as well is just like spending more time in nature. That's something that's been very grounding, especially when you work from home and you're like cooped up in your room, where there's like barely any sunlight. So that's where I see healing, happening day to day for me.
There's also a level of interpersonal healing too, right? Because you're in community and your boss is someone who you've known for over a decade. You came in with one of your closest friends. And so I'm curious what like healing interpersonally looks like, or even growth, like I feel like sometimes when we say the word healing, the connotation is that there's something broken that we fixed, but that's not necessarily the case either. It's like where have you seen shifts and growth in your personal relationships as they relate to like being within SoCal PICRT?
So, working in the Pacific Islander community, I think relationship building is something that is vital when it comes to the work. And one thing that we're actually really good at, right? So, one of the values that we hold amongst all islands is, family and ensuring that we take care of each other. So, when it comes to our like the interpersonal relationships that I have and how it pours into the work, I think it's something that helps our team grow together and just like be able to learn each other's working style. And I think that's for any team across the board. But when it comes to our Pacific Islander community, one highlight that I have is that I'm able to work with one of my close friends. Actually, four close friends. It's kind of crazy. And they all were mentored by OEC. That's why I say that it's kind of crazy. Like two of them are at Ocapica, right? One of them's at Pitt and then the other ones with SoCal PICRT. But we have this like fellowship to where like we have our personal relationships and be able to share what's going on in community together because we cover different parts of Southern California, but also our scope of work is different. And it's really nice being able to depend on others when it comes to nonprofit work because it can get really stressful, right? And being able to have like a strong ED as well is nice to have because times can be rough, right? And there's a lot of barriers when it comes to doing community work to where capacity levels can be really low. And the great part of having those relationships is like if I show up like 10%, then like I can depend on my sisters to like make up the rest, right? And then just picking each other up when one has fallen, right? And ensuring that we uplift each other through the work. And I think that's one thing that Alicia always instilled in me is like, we want to make sure that we work together so we can go together, right? And there's enough for everyone to eat. And that's the best way that we can thrive together as a community rather than being in competition, right? And I think being part of SoCal Picker and the coalition that we do hold is like a testament to how we all work together, right? And how we're all able to pull resources together. Because like, SoCal Picker actually started from community being able to gather. And it was like the way that they gathered was the most efficient way was to gather all the leaders that are doing the work and pulling all the resources together. So I guess yeah, it's like true reflection of how important personal relationships are for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's unique because not every nonprofit has such close ties like within the organization and with community. I feel like a lot of the conversation around like the nonprofit industrial complex is like these kind of like saviors coming into organization or coming into community, but that's not the case here. It's really like community created this organization, which is beautiful. I want to go back again to this idea of your own healing journey. I'm curious along the way, what's been a defining moment for you in your healing?
Honestly, I think my defining moment was like obviously forcing me to do all these presentations and having to network at conferences because I'm such an introvert. That's why.
Mm. I mean, even being on this, we were talking before we hit record, right? On
Yeah.
like you're like, why did they choose me? It's because I was the only one available, and I'm like, no, Isa, that's not the only reason.
I guess it was meant to be.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So it's interesting when we have mentors who can see our potential more than we can see in ourselves. And that's a
Yeah.
beautiful part of being in these kind of like intergenerational like mentorship relationships and within these communities and organizations that allow for them. And that's something that we see really beautifully within Healing Tides because there's, you know, the elders and the aunties who have like been in the work forever. And then there's folks who are now like coming into community work professionally for the first time. I'm curious if you see like a difference between the two generations.
Oh, most definitely.
I
But
love.
it's so it's kind of funny because like I'm considered one of the younger ones, right? Because there's elders and then there's emerging leaders, right? I have so many conversations with my peers about the differences. I think when it comes to the older generation, there's some things that we don't understand when it comes to their processes. And we have this like it's so bad. It's like this ongoing joke about like them passing the torch and us trying to catch the torch, but them not necessarily wanting to let go of the torch. Like, it's so bad. Like we laugh we laugh about that, but I don't think we've ever really had conversations with the elders about how we feel as emerging leaders that are coming into the work because they have so many years of experience, right? And I think as time passes, so many things change. And when it comes to like generational differences, right, it's like or just like how we function in the Pacific Island community, right? When it comes to an elder, most times we have to respect what they're saying and just move on. And I think being part of the community where there's different generations, right? It's almost as if like trying to find the balance between inserting yourself and making sure that you're still being respectful when it comes to sharing your opinion on something. And I think the dynamics, it's just like my peers, like we understand like the old school mentality of like we don't really speak unless spoken to. So that's the reason why we laugh about the elders sometimes is because it's like they welcome us into the space, right? But it's almost as if like we still don't have the opportunity to speak up sometimes. And I think that's just like a very Pacific Islander thing. It's just like working with someone that's older versus working with someone that is your own peer is totally different. And it just depends on how people work too. Like some elders, like they take more space than others, right? Some want to hear more from the younger folks, but it's really just like a respecting within our cultures that creates that dynamic. And just making sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes, right? And I just hope for the future, like that the elders are able to trust like the emerging leaders more to be able to push us into like these leadership roles, right? And to trust us enough to guide us there if things don't really work out. Because I was talking to one of the other presidents of Moni from Lingafa, and he was saying that it's very hard to bring someone into the work and train them to become not yourself, right? But to train them to be their best selves and to, it's like a balance between like, wanting to have control and letting them grow into the work themselves. And I know that when it comes to like elders training, the emerging leaders, it might be difficult for them to let them grow through the work, right? And yeah, our coalition is like there's so many ages. So it's just like it's like we're not always on the same page, but we eventually get there when it comes to our processes. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a conversation with one of the aunties several months ago, and she was saying that when she was an emerging leader, it was this idea of like, get out of the kitchen. Like, they weren't even really allowed to be in the room, or like, if they were in the room, you kind of just have to watch what's happening and you kind of have to just learn through osmosis, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way that like kind of that older generation learned how to step into community work is through just that old way. And so it's interesting that like you like on the one hand it's like you're trying to catch the torch, but like they don't really want to, there's like certain aspects of like not wanting to let go of the torch, which is totally understandable, right? For someone who has been in work for so long, there's a certain grief that goes with letting go, right? And then on the flip side, you have some experiences where you are able to go grow through the work because you have a mentor who does like trust you in that way and has seen you grow already. So there's like kind of both sides of it happening at the same time.
I do think that the older generation is more open to collaborating with like emerging leaders compared to like back then. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as our work has progressed, so you came into Healing Tides during phase two. Phase one was focused on individual leaders. At the time, we were coaching two of the founders, right? Two of the aunties. And in the midst of phase one into phase two, SoCal PICRT transitioned, right? A new ED, staff. And so now you and Ray are basically in charge of kind of the implementation of the shifts of the organization that are happening. So I'm curious your experience with like leading that part of this work.
Yeah, I actually came into the second part of Healing Tides not really understanding the role that we were going to take, but also I think at the time when we first gathered, like for our convening, it wasn't until then that I realized that we were going to help build structure for SoCal PICRT. And I think at the time I had low capacity, right? I was already dealing with a lot of things at home. On top of that, dealing with all the other things that I do for SoCal PICRT, that it was a tough time. Like trying to figure out like, okay, how am I going to help build capacity for our own org and build all these structures? And thankfully, I have Alisi and Ray to be able to think these things through. But at one point, when we're trying to train staff, right, trying to create like a staff development day, right, and just presenting back to staff like what the things that we're going to do, I realized that at that moment that this is something that I wasn't really necessarily enjoying, and I felt like it was just another thing on the list of things for me to do, and something that I felt like I didn't necessarily agree to because I didn't really know what the role entailed until we gathered at the convening. But it took a while for me to rethink about like how Healing Tides has helped our org in general. And it actually took having a winter break for me to be able to sort through those things, right? Because I think with 2025, things have just been happening back to back. And like, I think our org in general has not caught a break, right? With all the things that were running at the time. Yeah, so what was hard for me was coming on this platform and like talking and thinking about the healing framing, right? Part of it. I was just because during the time I was like thinking like, how is this healing for me if I have low capacity and I'm like having to deal with like it's a big task to create these processes, right? And think through these pieces and train a staff that is still developing, right? We've been around since COVID, but I think transitioning from like working under four people to just one has helped us like define more of a path when it comes to what needs to be done. So being able to work with Ray, I've been grateful to be able to depend on her to carry the work for us as well. But it doesn't mean that the work is not stressful, right? And doesn't take a toll on people. So one thing is finding balance, right, between the workload and ensuring that we're all doing our part. And then another thing is like following through and making sure that staff is getting the training that they need. After winter break, right, where like I was thinking like this is not even healing for me, right? I was able to reflect on how much Healing Tides has actually helped our org when it comes to development and how it has helped us like shape how we can better work as a team and just like define the different roles that we carry. And I think like Healing Tides made it easier for us to make time for these things, whereas before, when it was under four people that were volunteer based, there wasn't really time to be able to think through like how to use your Google Calendar, right? Or think through like what's the best way to communicate when it comes to events. And just all the logistic parts that are behind the scenes, right? And then being able to train staff on things that they've never learned is something that I felt was really important to do, but also like just seeing our team grow together is something that I'm very grateful for, and I think is part of the healing part, right? Where before it was almost as if like you just figure it out day by day, and like you have to ask many questions on like where do I go for this? Who do I talk to for this, right? To where like we are able to like streamline many things rather than having to like be in survival mode and figure out things as we go, right? And I think that's a common theme when it comes to working in nonprofit is like the it's almost as if like a lot of us are in survival mode when it comes to the work and like things are very last minute. Times are things are always changing, right? You just always have to be on your toes and like have to adapt to things. And like I said before, is like there's so much work to do. So it's like when can you find these times to have a break from the thing, like from nonprofit work? And I think that's one thing that we're trying to incorporate, or like that Alicia always incorporates, is like ensuring that we are taking care of ourselves. She shows a lot of grace when it comes to the work, understanding that we all carry different roles in our own family. So she usually meets us where we're at. And I can't say that for all orgs, like leadership does that, right? And I think in the corporate world, like if you think about it, like they don't really allow for folks to be able to focus on their personal lives. It's usually just about the business, right? And how you can be a pawn in their structure. But I think that's one thing that I was able to reflect on was like how healing it is to have someone that allows us to be ourselves and then to understand like the different roles that we have. And then, yeah, just ensuring that we're not going crazy by ourselves. Like, like it's so, because it's like so easy to like be in your own world, especially when you work by yourself, right? I think the check-ins help out a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think what I'm hearing you say is that, like, prioritizing the wellness of the people within the team is baked into the structure of the organization because of how Alisi leads it, but also because of how you are building like the team development work. Something as simple as like everyone being on the same page about how we're using Google Calendar means that you're eliminating maybe, I don't know, dozens of times where someone like misses a meeting or like they didn't know something was due, and which creates confusion, which creates conflict, right? Something as simple as that can be like actually healing because you're like just giving more, you're like facilitating something being easier for everyone, especially in the type of work that is always like in response to community needs. There's always an urgent need, and so the more that you can build those structures and taking a step back and looking at them from time to time, the more that you are able to just respond better and like and not be in that kind of like panic mode all the time. So I wasn't at the last SoCal PICRT convening, but I heard a little rumor that there is now a committee devoted to self care. Is that right?
They're actually creating one. Yeah. I think that's something that everyone would like they agreed with. Like someone mentioned it and all you heard is like, yeah, like across the board. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having a committee within a coalition that is devoted to self care, and I don't know if self care is the word, where it was community care or healing or wellness or whatever it was, this idea that like we're going to center ourselves in the work is so, just tells me that that's baked into the culture of the organization. I'm curious, like, with this idea of healing is just how part of how we work. What do you see for SoCal PICRT in the future? Let's say, I don't know, 5, 10 years from now, with this being like really centered.
You know what I see for SoCal Picker, especially if we have the that committee, is people prioritizing themselves more and their own mental health. I think when you work in community, you're very selfless when it comes to what you bring to the table. And like you carry a lot of people on your shoulders. I don't know if I see this for SoCal Picker, but one of my wishes would be for folks to be able to find the balance between taking care of themselves and the work. Because what I notice amongst most people doing the work now is that they not only take care of community, but they also play like huge caregiving roles in their own family. And I'm one of them too, right? Where like some days like I have to help my grandparents or make sure that my parents are good. And that can take a toll on your own mental being able to like while you're doing the work, right? Some days are good, some days are bad. So if we have a committee like that that's able to focus on self-care, right, or offer space for folks to decompress, I think that's one element that would help a lot for folks dealing with things. And I think in community we don't have enough spaces that gather people to be able to decompress, to practice, like breathing exercises, because it's just, or just activities around wellness, right? Because in our community, it's always like go, go, go. There's never really times for us to slow down and just be able to sit there and process unless you're doing it yourself, right? And it's something that you incorporate into your like routine. So yeah, I just hope that like folks are able to find more time to release because of how demanding the work is. Yeah.
SoCal PICRT has something coming up where it is a moment for community to just come together, to move together. It's also a
Yes.
fundraiser. Do you want to talk a little bit about the 5K?
We're having our inaugural fundraiser, our Fresh Way 5K on January 24th. It's a Saturday at 8:30 a.m. We will be walking, running, skipping in Long Beach.
What was like the thinking behind a 5K? Like you mentioned, I mean, it I think connects back to this idea of like the community having a place to kind of like nourish and care for itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the thinking behind it? It's such a cool idea.
Yeah, so actually it stemmed from being part of the run club. But yeah, it all started from the Pacifica Run Club, and then here we are with our own 5K. And I think Clara, she's ran over like 10 5Ks with the Better World Running. So they didn't really hesitate to partner with us, and they're all about community and ensuring that like they meet community where they're at as well.
We'll share the link to the 5K. I will be there. I will be walking it. If anyone wants to join, it's again January 24th in Long
Yes.
Beach. Great. Is there anything else, Isa, that you wanted to share about SoCal Picker and your work?
No, I just want to say thank you for having this platform and for bringing us in. I think it's our narratives are really important. So you being able to shine light on our org is something that we're very grateful for. Yeah.
Thank you, Isa. It's honestly my honor to be part of the design team that gets to support you and gets to be, you know, like almost like this like wave behind you all to support your work and your healing and just like the relationships that are ongoing and the community that you are supporting as well. So we will link all of the ways to connect with SoCal PICRT on Instagram, on YouTube, through the 5K, their website, everything. And if you can support SoCal PICRT, I invite you to do that. And I will see you next time. Thank you all so much. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps. And so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.